I don't have any fancy tapes for you, but I've got a few pictures of lightnings and things that, if you haven't seen one before. I was lucky enough to fly lightnings for about 10 years with the RAF, the Royal Saudi Air Force, and with British Aerospace. My story to start with was much the same as Graham's. I went to the UK under the same system and eventually got my wings at Swindon, same place that he did, but I was like 3 or 4 years later. From Swindon I was posted to lightning conversion, a hunter conversion. So I went to Chivenor and Devon, did the hunter conversion, and then I was posted to number 92 Fighter Squadron at Beaconsfield in Yorkshire, England. And 92, the year before they'd been the Blue Diamonds doing the flight demonstrations, flight shows and Farnborough and things. There was a lightning squadron going to do it that year, which I think was treble 1. There were only 3 lightning squadrons at that stage, and they were all grounded because of a major hydraulic modification. So at very short notice, 92 was told they were going to be the aerobatic squadron again, and having arrived there a week before, they didn't need anyone new to be doing this. They dragged in a few of the aces from other squadrons, and I was farmed off down the road to number 19 squadron, which is right next door at Beaconsfield. I was a bit miffed about that, but that's the way it was. And in the event it worked out well because 19 got lightnings before 92. So we converted in October 1962 at Middleton St George, and from early 1963 onwards we were getting the latest lightnings, which was the Lightning F2. So F2 in those 2 photos here, the 2 black and white ones. The Lightning was a fantastic aeroplane. It was a big jump from the Hunter. The Hunter was a beautiful aeroplane to fly, a real pilot's aircraft, simple. You could get full aileron with one finger, and it had a phenomenal roll weight. It had an Avon engine, Rolls-Royce Avon, which is the most usable aircraft engine I've ever come across. You can slam it open, slam it closed at any speed, and it copes with it. The Hunters we converted on had the 7,500 pound thrust bomb, and then the Hunter 6s, the air defence ones, they were 10,000 pounds thrust. The Lightning was basically 2 Hunters, one on top of the other. It had two of the same Avons. They were a small aeroplane by 747 standards, but by fighter standards they were very big. 34,000 pounds, which is, how many tons is that? 15.5 tons, as opposed to about 10 tons for a Hunter. 2 10,000 pound thrust engines with reheat that gave 14,000 pounds, so a total of 28,000 pounds, and with a takeoff weight of 34,000 pounds, by landing weight you're down to a thrust to weight ratio of about 1 to 1. And that was reflected in the performance of the aircraft. For those who are used to light aircraft, the Lightning was the same span as the Cessna 152 and the same weight as 20 152s. The service ceiling was 54,000 feet, which doesn't sound all that high, I guess, but if you wanted to go above that height, we used an energy climb. So an energy climb meant accelerating to an excess of Mach 1 and then using the speed to get you to height. and we had a limit of 60,000 feet, which was purely an oxygen thing, but the aircraft could easily exceed that. And I have heard of one going to 88,000 feet, but I don't think I actually believe it. Some of the training they did once. So the aircraft replaced the Javelin and the Hunter, so it was had an all-weather capability, radar, fly it in any conditions almost, and was armed with two fire streak missiles, which are heat-guided missiles. They're very accurate. Once they lock on, you can guarantee a kill, but you have to get into the right area to do that. And that's basically a 30-degree cone behind the aircraft you're attacking. It also had two 30mm Asian guns, which are very powerful guns with about 1,000 rounds, I think, each. It doesn't sound like much, that's about 10 seconds of firing, but 10 seconds is a lot of shooting. The Lightning had the best acceleration, the best rate of climb, and the best turning performance of all its contemporaries. And we had one occasion when we proved at least part of that. We had a detachment to Beauvechain. 4 aircraft went there. Beauvechain is a NATO base in Belgium, and we used to have these from time to time just to test the facilities in other NATO bases. Anyway, we arrived there, and very late on Friday, we arrived on a Friday, very late Friday night, the colonel that commanded the local F-104 squadron, in the bar this was, challenged us to a race. We of course accepted, and to our surprise, on Monday morning when we were due to leave, he turned up in his flying suit and everything and said, "I'm ready for the race." So we lined up a Lightning and an F-104G on the runway together, side by side, and he literally said, "Ready, steady, go." And just before he said go, he let the brakes off on the 104, which was the guy on the Lightning said it was just about bouncing down the runway at this stage. He had so much power on. Lightning, we can't put full power on, even cold power with the brakes on, because it'll just burst the tyres. So grease the brakes up at full power, then you have to lock the throttles outboard to engage reheat, and there's a sort of pause while the nozzle's open, so you actually lose thrust initially, and then they light boom, boom, you can feel it in your back, and away you go. And by halfway down the runway, he was in front of the 104 and off the ground well before it. And the race was to 36,000 feet. When he got to 36,000 feet, the 104 admitted that he was at 20,000 feet, and we think he was a bit lower than that. So that gives you an idea of the climb. The acceleration of the Lightning from brakes off to airborne is about 12 seconds, by which time you're doing 150, 160 knots. You have to heave it off the ground fairly quickly because you're accelerating so rapidly. You can actually see that photo there, see how close the tail is to the ground, the middle one. We never had a tail shot, by the way. The moment the wheels are off the ground, you hit the up button, the main wheels immediately go whoops back into the wing, and the nose wheel doesn't start retracting until the main wheels are up. And if you hadn't had the button in by the time you're doing about 170 knots, the nose wheel will never make it against the switch for the it retracts forwards. So 45 seconds after brakes off, you're doing 450 knots, probably about 3,000 feet, and you pull the nose up and up you go. The rate of climb way in excess of 50,000 feet a minute at that stage. And after 2 minutes and 35 seconds, you're level at 36,000 feet, doing 0.99. So I don't think there's any other aeroplane that could match anything like that, to be honest. With the Lightning, we could start both engines, have all the systems running, and you're off the ground inside 2 minutes from sitting in the cockpit. So during one of the frequent exercises, you'd be sitting in the cockpit at the side of the runway, strapped in, ready to go. Within 2 minutes of someone saying go, you'd be off the ground. The object of the aircraft was an interceptor, very short range by the way. The fuel that it carried, even with the ventral tank underneath, the little tank under the fuselage, was 7,200 pounds, which is 3.5 tons. Sounds like a lot of fuel, but I don't think either Graham or I ever landed a 747 with that little amount of fuel. You'd be sweating if you did, and that's what we started with. The fuel gauges were almost the primary instrument, because you could actually, there were 2 small gauges like that, you could actually see them moving when you were in reheat. And the idea was that as an interceptor, sit on the edge of the runway. When the Russian bombers were getting close, off you'd go, intercept them 30 or 40 miles out, shoot them down, back on the ground. You'd be back on the ground inside 20 minutes. And it took 10 to 15 minutes to turn the aircraft around, rearm it, and you'd be ready to go again for the next. That was a really good idea, except that someone had spoilt it all by inventing standoff bombs, which they could drop further out and the guys didn't. So the Lightning quickly had refuelling probes fitted, and that changed the game quite a lot. We learned to refuel in the air from Valiant tankers and later on Victors. That's a Victor tanker on the right there and on the left. Refueling was quite interesting. It's, I guess you did it in Vulcan City, right? Oh, okay, yeah. And it's a bit like learning to ride a bike. The probe on the Lightning was on the left side, probably about 2 metres from where you were sitting, and about just on the edge of your vision. So you couldn't look at that and look at what you were formatting on at the same time. So they had a bunch of lines painted on the aircraft that you were refueling from. You knew which was your line, you flew down that line, and on peripheral vision you could check the height of the drogue and hopefully drive into it. Now, if you went into it too slowly, you got what you call the soft contact, and when the fuel started, it all come spraying out everywhere. If you hit it too hard, there was a weak link in it, and the drogue came off. And I had the pleasure of landing once with a drogue sitting on the end of the probe while the tanker went home to get a new one. But after a while, I got used to it, and it actually became relatively easy. Yeah, we had a few interesting detachments from time to time. We went to Cyprus twice for 6 weeks. That's when they were having a problem with Turks, and the Greek Cypriots were not very happy with each other. We were just there to show the flag, to be honest. Been to Bodo once, which is north of the Arctic Circle in Norway. It was another one of these NATO detachments. And we discovered when we got there, the runway was beautiful, but the week before they'd been operating off hard-packed snow, which I don't know how the Lightning would have behaved on that. Tyre pressures on the Lightning are 350 psi, and tyres are filled with nitrogen. And bursting tyres wasn't an unusual thing, to be honest. The Leconfield where we flew from was noted for its crosswinds. The runway was north-south, prevailing wind was westerly, and a new set of tyres would probably last 3 landings. And to burst a tyre was not at all unusual. You'd hear the bang as it went, you wouldn't know which one it was, because they're only about 3 or 4 inches deep, so it didn't lean one way or the other, and it didn't seem to make any difference to the braking. So you just got used to it. Nearly all the flying was done in pairs. Targets were always, or usually, Canberras that were out there for that reason, or if we were a pair, we'd split and take it in turns attacking the other one. And any incoming V-bombers, like the Vulcans, we'd be right after them. The Vulcans, when they were coming back, they were usually light, and believe me, a Vulcan at 40,000 feet turns very well. It takes a lot of getting behind. And as I mentioned before, you have to get them with the missiles okay, but usually practice with the guns, because the missile bit was relatively easy. And with guns, you could hold them in the turn for about 90 degrees, and then you started falling outside them. But we got around that by, if we were in a pair, when you turned in behind them, the second guy dropped back, so he was 3 miles behind. And then, as the Vulcan finished its turn, it'd be right in front of the second one. So, but I don't think the Russians would turn like that. And B, they'd be heavy, so because they still have their bombs and hopefully for them enough fuel to get back to Moscow. Now the Cold War, as Graham mentioned, it was very real in those days. The Russians had something like 30 or 40,000 atomic bombs of one sort or another. The Americans had a few less, but not many less. And that's not counting the British and the French and anyone else that might have had them. As Graham mentioned, the Thor missiles were all around us, and they had British warheads on American rockets, and the bloodhounds that protected them, they used to practice too. And as we flew over the bloodhound base, you could see the missiles follow you around. And the British people had been told that in the event of an unplanned nuclear attack, they had 4 minutes. And I'm quite sure that all of Western Europe, UK, North America, and Russia would have been wiped out in a nuclear war. So it was a little bit scary in some ways. decided I'd had enough of drilling holes in the sky, and I thought I'd come back to New Zealand and get a job with Air New Zealand or something like that. So I gave the Air Force, I was on an 8-year contract, a 12-year one with an option to leave after 8. I decided to leave after 8, and I gave them a year's notice, thinking that having that much notice, they would say, oh, it's not worth shifting and we'll leave them on the Lightning Squadron. But I got an instant posting to a simulator, so I was a bit bitter and twisted about that. That was at Swindleby in Lincolnshire, not far away. Not Swindleby, Binbrook in Lincolnshire, not far away. And while I was there, I managed to bludge the odd ride in the Lightning, but nothing much. But about that time, the Saudis signed a contract with British Aircraft Corporation to buy 40 Lightnings and 24 Strike Masters, plus a missile, ground surface-to-air missile and radar system. And being the odd, well, you know about the war between Saudi Arabia and Yemen, which is going on now. Well, there ain't nothing new under the sun. They were fighting then. It was and I'm talking about 1965, 66, the Yemenis royalists were backed by Saudi Arabia and the Republicans were backed by Egypt. And to that end there were Egyptian MiGs in Sana'a, which from time to time were crossing the border and shooting up the odd town. And the Saudis decided they needed an Air Force to look after them. But the problem was that it was going to be 2 years before the first Lightnings were delivered. So the Air Ministry and the RAF decided they'd give them an interim Air Force. And this was 6 Lightnings and 6 Hunters, and they were going to supply pilots from somewhere. And that happened in June '66. Well, I was due to leave shortly after that, and the powers that be in the Air Force said that any Lightning pilot who was about to leave could apply for a contract in Saudi Arabia. Well, there were only 2 of us, there's myself and Jack O'Dowd. Jack O'Dowd's also a Kiwi. He said he wasn't interested, but I was, so I signed up, and a month or so later I was in Saudi Arabia and for that. So the exercise was called Magic Carpet, and to be honest, it was I was there 2 years. The 2nd year I worked direct for the Saudi Air Force, and so I guess that made me a mercenary, but we never actually shot at anyone. The moment the Lightnings and Hunters arrived, the MiGs disappeared, and it was a long 2 years. I had a lot of experiences but didn't really enjoy it, and at the end of it I heard that British Aircraft Corporation needed a Lightning pilot, flight refueling qualified, with Middle East experience immediately. Well, I had a look down the list and I couldn't see anyone else who had those 3. There's plenty had 2 of those qualifications, and I figured I was the only one that had all 3. So when I left Saudi Arabia, I raced off to BAC, went in and had an interview, and a couple of days later, BAC was at Warton in Lancashire. A couple of days later I was in the south of England and I had a call telling me I had the job, get back as quick as I could, but I needed a licence. And I said, what sort of licence? And they said, any pilot's licence. Being a military person, I hadn't even thought about getting a licence. I said, how about a PPL? They said, yes. Get back here with a PPL and you're in work. And so I raced into the nearest bureau and said, had the logbook and everything, how do I get a PPL? They said, well, sit down here and do this exam. I sat down and half an hour later I'd done the exam. They said I'd passed enough of the questions and off I went with a piece of paper and a stamp to the civil aviation in London and told them what you want, PPL, what type of aircraft you want on it, lightning. We can do that, but you'll have to have a multi-rating. What are you going to do your multi-rating in? I said, lightning. And they said, well, you can't do a multi-rating in the lightning because the engines are one above the other, and therefore it only counts as a single engine aircraft. And I said, well, if it's only a single engine aircraft, I don't need a multi-rating, do I? And they said, yes, you do. And I sort of was digging my heels in, and they were too, and eventually the guy disappeared behind the screen, and after about 15 minutes, I came back and said, here's a QPL. So I raced up to the VAC and basically I had a job.
After 63 visits.
My job was to fly lightnings to Saudi Arabia basically, and that was flight refueling all the way. And then a typical sortie would be 3 Victor tankers and 2 lightnings. That sounds like a lot of tankers to not many lightnings. But they said, the Air Force said, well, we'd have to detach the tankers out anyway, so we might as well go out with them. That way we didn't have to try and find them as well, that's all. And so 3 Victors and 2 Lightnings would head off. As soon as we got with them, we had to refuel immediately because we couldn't refuel over in northern France for some reason. And then further on, the first tanker would refuel the other 2 tankers, refuel the Lightnings, go back. The second one would refuel us most of the way. We refueled 6 times. It sounds like a lot, but it was basically just topping up all the time because we had to assume that when you made contact, you for some reason didn't get fuel, and therefore you had to be able to get to a bolt hole to land within basically an hour's flying. So they'd stick with us all the way. The second one would go into Malta, and the third one would refuel us right up to 5 miles off the coast of Egypt. Now, Egypt wasn't speaking to the RAF at that stage, so they couldn't fly into Egyptian airspace, but we could because we were Saudis. And so off we'd go to, they'd peel off into Cyprus, and we'd carry on and land in Jeddah, and ferry the aircraft to Riyadh. So I stayed on at BAC for a few years doing that and other jobs. I was current on 5 types at one stage, which was great fun. But while I was there, I rubbed shoulders with some really well-known pilots. I'd just like to tell you about 1 or 2 of them, just to finish up. The director of flight ops was Roland Beaumont, B, we call them. B was a World War II ace on hurricanes and typhoons. He made the typhoon famous for his shooting up tanks and trains. And he was also a test pilot with Hawkers. And he went on to tests as well. He flew the first British aircraft to fly supersonic in level flight, which was a Lightning. He was the first to go to Mark II, and that was in the Lightning. And his first flight, he did the first flight on the Canberra, the Lightning, and the TSR-2. He was quite a reclusive guy, well known in the flying world, and he commanded a lot of respect. Another one was Mike Randrup. Mike Randrup was a very unassuming guy. He was the VAC manager in Saudi Arabia, and he was you got to know him through the Typhoon program. He was the chief test pilot for Napier's. Napier's built the engine submitting the Typhoon, which was a 24-cylinder sleeve valve Napier Sabre engine, which started off at 2,000 horsepower and then was developed to 3,500 horsepower. So it was a fantastic engine. The only catch was, in the early days, it was extremely unreliable. And Mike Randrup's main claim to fame was that he was the most experienced glider pilot in England. He also held the world altitude record in Canberra at one stage, 70,000 feet, and that was a Canberra with two rocket engines, which he turned on to about 40,000 feet, I think it was, and shot up to 70. The chief test pilot was Jimmy Dell, the deputy Tim Ferguson. They were both highly respected pilots. And then, has anyone ever heard about rolling wall coupling or inertia coupling? It's a malaise that occurs only in very high performance aircraft, modern ones, where they have a long thin fuselage with all the weight in the fuselage and small wings. And if you can imagine them flying at very high speed and with a reasonably high angle of attack, if you think of the fuselage as being a rod with a weight on each end, like a dumbbell, if you're flying a dumbbell along like this and you do that, the weights tend to straighten out to the axis. You understand that? It's like a governor on an engine. The weight of the aircraft will try to get onto the same axis as the roll. And of course, that if you suddenly increase the angle of attack at that stage, it's not going to do the aircraft a lot of good. So Johnny Squire was doing what they call a corner point exercise. Corner point is a graph which usually has something up in the vertical axis, like say altitude, and a horizontal axis which say is speed, and then there's a line goes up from the maximum speed and one across from the maximum altitude. Where they intersect, it's called a corner point, and all aircraft are tested to the corner point. Well, Johnny Squire had to fly in this Lightning at Mach 1.7, which equates to 650 knots indicated, at about 40,000 feet, put it into a turn, and then apply maximum aileron in the other direction for the aircraft. That's when they discovered rolling wall coupling in Britain, because the aircraft tried to align itself to the axis of the roll, and it basically broke up. It just fell to pieces. Before Johnny Squire was sitting in his ejection seat, and he found himself a couple of seconds later still sitting in his ejection seat, but with no aeroplane. He hadn't bailed out, he hadn't ejected, and here he was. And because he hadn't ejected, the seat didn't go through its normal sequence, which is to fire out a little drogue which stabilises the seat as it falls, and then as you get to about 10,000 feet, it will tip the pilot out of the seat and pull the parachute out. You have to do all that manually, which he did successfully. He was recorded as being the first man to eject from a supersonic aircraft, but it was incorrect because, as I said, he didn't eject, he fell out. And he landed in the Irish Sea, inflated his dinghy, climbed into it, and turned on his Sabi beacon. It was lousy conditions, low cloud, and strong winds, and after 2 years of searching, all they had found was a fishing boat which reported seeing a lightning, or seeing an aeroplane dive into the water. So they thought that was the end of poor old Johnny Squire. They gave up looking, and nearly 2 days after the event, he actually paddled ashore in his dinghy in Stranraer in Scotland. And so he was a fairly interesting guy. One other of note, John Coburn. He did the spinning trials of the Lightning. They decided that Lightnings could spin. Lightning's very forgiving. If you pull too hard in a turn and go into an incipient spin, just relax the back pressure and it continues fine. But this was proper spinning. He did two details of spinning, which were totally successful. On the third one, it failed to recover. So the minimum height for spinning in the Lightning is 10,000 feet. It hasn't recovered by 10,000 feet like the hot. And 10,000 feet seems like a lot, but it goes up at 50,000 feet and it goes down at that same speed when it's spinning. And it's a landing place about 12 seconds to impact. So it only went at 10,000 feet or thereabouts. The aeroplane continued and fell into a place called Pilling Bog. And disappeared into the bog and it's never been seen since. There's a hole in the ground, but that was it. They didn't even bother trying to get it out. So that was the end of the spinning. So yes, I had a wonderful time at BAC. Incidentally, English Electric designed and built the Lightning. BAC was what they became when they amalgamated with other companies like Mrs. Vickers, and then later it became British Aerospace when they amalgamated again with the Hawker Siddeley Group. So if I keep saying BAC or English Electric or BA, it's the same place. Anyway, after 5 years there, I came home on holiday and I hadn't even thought of applying to Air New Zealand, but someone said I'd been in for an interview yet. And I said no, why? And they said, oh, Air New Zealand's recruiting, get in there quick. So I went in and it was just the time that they expanded with the DC-10 and it was sort of obvious when I went in that they were desperate and they'd even take me, having turned me down flat 6 years before. And so went back to the UK. 3 months later I was back here and that's the end of my story about Lightnings. So thanks very much for listening. I hope I haven't bored you too much. I'm sorry I didn't have any tapes or anything. Oh, just one thing, this photo here, that's a Victor tanker. That's what it looks like as you approach it. And that's the view when you're actually refueling. That's taken from the T-55 that was on its way to Saudi Arabia. The guy on the right-hand seat took that while we were actually refueling. So as you can see, you get up pretty close and personal. So thanks very much.